that we would have more things to come. You all remember that? I had no idea that 2-3 years ago we would have this to come. Now I'm pointing at something. There's a document down here in front of the pulpit, the podium here. Please come by and see it afterwards. Myron, wherever he's floating around, he will take it with him, or Jimmy will take it with him later. This is what we're talking about tonight, and that is the 1859 contract and building specifications for our sanctuary. It's 32 pages long, the contract's 2 pages, and the specifications are 30 pages. And they're in excellent condition. How did I find them? People have been asking me. Okay, I told you you had to wait, and now I'm going to tell you. I found them by continuing to talk to people in Griffin, Georgia. Y'all might remember Dr. Devotee, when he left Columbus, he moved to Griffin. And there were a couple of children who survived and had families. And anyway, for 100 and something years in Griffin, Georgia, they've been collecting things. There's a gentleman over there who has 2 warehouses of stuff he's collected from the Griffin area. So after a year of hunting through one of his warehouses, he found these documents. He knew he had them. I hope none of you are that way, but I'm kind of getting that way. I know I have something, but I've got to find it. I've got enough. It takes a long time, and it did take him. So I just want to tell you that's how it happened, how that got started. I would like to say that I do have a presentation, and I'm going to read this part of it. And I've already told you what it's about. I have this in honor of and in memory of. In honor of Edward Warner Neal for his lifetime commitment to historical architecture in Columbus, Georgia. In particular, his dedication to our historic sanctuary. We will always be grateful to his unwavering support, talents, knowledge, and skills. Also, in memory of D. Hal Averett for his dedication to all aspects of our church, especially its history. Hal was part of every corner of the church, everywhere, doing everything. He was always encouraging in every aspect of life, and we wish to remember him as we continue to carry out the work of the church. I hereby dedicate these documents to these men and to the glory of God. And Jenna is here. Would you like to say a few words?
Say right now?
Yes.
All right. Before her presentation. Ginger called me this week to tell me that she was going to be here. I was supposed to be out of town, but it worked out for me to be here. But you know, it has been such an interesting journey for myself to go through this past year plus a few months, and just to look at all the things that Hal was involved in. If I'm honest, I would tell you that many times I was miffed because he was at some meeting at church and he'd already been at 3 meetings the day before, and it was like, well, he's never coming home. And one thing I've discovered is that those things meant so much to him, and it is the character that he was. I think when you're looking at history, I think that's what it becomes. It's the character of who we are, and that's why this was so important to him. And 2 side notes. One is that Ginger and Steve were in the same class that Hal and I were in as singles here at First Baptist. I had just come to town. No, I was not a Baptist, but I'd started dating Hal, so I had to be a Baptist. And I made a very good Baptist. And anyway, so we both got married the same day and the same year, and we couldn't be in each other's weddings because it was the same day and the same year. So that's... We announced it at the same time. So that's right. So anyway, that's a side note. The other side note is that Ed Neal and Hal and Jack Jenkins and Jack Collins, for the last year that Hal was alive, about once a month, Jack Collins, Ed Neal, Hal, and Jack Jenkins would go somewhere in Georgia to see some old piece of property. They would want to go see either Hal had worked on it or the guys had worked on it in the past or whatever. And they went all over the state of Georgia together and had the best time. Right before Hal died, they went on one of their last journeys. And it was just a really, in fact, it was actually when Hal was sick. We didn't know how sick he was, but it was so great that he did that with those men. And so I would just close by saying that I think I look at when she was mentioning the Devotee families and they had these 2 warehouses full of stuff. If anybody wants anything else, I have 5 more houses full of stuff. Not necessarily from First Baptist, but I did tell Bill Reeves today, I think I have all of Reeves Wrecking in 5 warehouses at Jordan High School, that I'm getting ready to have a big sale, but there's nothing from First Baptist that I know of. But anyway, I just think it's just a real honor, and for Hal to be brought up so many times, and has really made me look more at my own journey of faith, looking at where I'm involved and what I do. I will tell you, I look at prayers differently now. I look at things like these committees differently. There was a real commitment that he had. It wasn't just asked to be on a committee. I thought he just said yes to everything, but the truth is, he was involved in everything. And he really was in every corner of this church, and I see it and I feel it, and I'm so very grateful for it. And thank you so much, Ginger.
And before I launch into the actual documents, this gentleman right here, Hal Curvin, has recorded, he's photographed all the pages. Thank you. We appreciate it. Thank you. All right.
Wow.
There's a lot of stuff up here now.
There you go.
Yeah, I was just,
Okay.
I hadn't gotten there yet, Tim.
Thank you. All right, these are the document pages. You can look at them as close as you like, and we can get you better images another time if you need to, but see them as best as you can from here. This states that Matthias Beringer and Joseph Morton, they were called Beringer Morton Incorporated, or firm, built the church. And they were a business here in town. They built Dinglewood House. When I Googled the name, it came up pretty quickly. You can find it online easily enough that they did build Dinglewood. They had a sash, blind, and door company that they had been in operation for a while, so they did that. Also, Heinz Holt and Charles Cleghorn were on the contract. And I'm gonna step around for just a second.
So you can see some of it.
You can see some of it there, and you can probably see the signatures on the short page. The second page, you can see some of the signatures there. Basically, the contract states, and this is dated January the 29th, 1859. They were to have the basement finished by November the 1st of that year. And I have read in the ledger and other materials that we did occupy the basement before the end of the year. So that connects with what we know already. The building was to be totally finished by July 1st of 1860. So by the next summer, they were occupying the sanctuary.
Wow.
This should be page 1. Is that what y'all are seeing? Okay. It lists 8 sections of the plan: the front elevation, the flank elevation, basement floor, principal floor, transverse section, longitudinal section, ceiling, the gallery floor, and section of stairs. Now the gallery is the balcony. Okay, we would call it the balcony today. One thing that was stipulated in the contract is that they were using the plan of First Baptist Church of Montgomery, but they enlarged it. Now, I went online, and they didn't, I'm gonna fuss at them a little bit. First Baptist Montgomery didn't have a whole lot of history information, but I could kind of see an outline of what looked to be the front of their church, and it looks very different from ours. But I guess the interior must have been similar at that time. Also, our church had a tower. As you may know, it had a bell in it. We're gonna find out some interesting stuff about that bell. I just learned the other day when I really looked at it hard on the information here. Now, the foundation is mentioned some as well in this area. You may or may not see it on this page right here.
You can't see anything.
Oh, you can't see anything?
It's just hard to read. Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
But yeah, we can get you, if you want to actually see, you know, we can show it to you later, or I can send you information. Wasn't sure how much you could see, so I'll tell you what's on some of this. The foundation has 6.5 bricks wide. So somebody was talking about today that they hit what they thought was a wall or a fence recently and doing some digging around the church. That might be part of the foundation, if it's 6.5 bricks wide. By the time they got up to the basement floor, it was 3 bricks wide. Area around the furnaces were 3.5 bricks, 1.5 bricks at the basement floor timbers, etc. The point I'm making is that it had a really good foundation. Aren't we glad? In a lot of ways, it had a good foundation. One other interesting thing I thought, between the timbers and the basement floor, they put tar and charcoal. They filled it in with tar and charcoal. Maybe that was common at that time. There were 2 furnaces, 4 flumes in walls, 2 fireplaces in the rear of the basement. So in the back of the basement, there were 2 large fireplaces. There were 2 front doors and only 1 rear door. There were iron rods that anchored the beams, and they went into some big detail about the iron rods and exactly where they were to go within the beams. Okay. Let me go and take you on to page 19. Because we just have a brief period of time, I don't want to not get to this section.
Are we on page?
Uh-huh.
Anyway, this is talking about the windows. Each window had 54 lights. Now, I found out that lights mean panels, or panes, I should say. Each pane was 12 by 27 inches. So this was before the stained glass, which came some decades later. There were blinds on the outside, but they call blinds, we call them shutters today. Okay, they were talking about the hinges and what they were to be made of. Also on this page, on page 19, it talks about that there were 2 windows, and they were much smaller, were to the rear of the pulpit. So there were actually windows at the back of the church in this original structure. Okay, on page 20, which we will not show on the screen, there was a tower for the bell and the organ, and the organ was in the gallery. And I told you earlier, the gallery was the balcony. So the organ was in the balcony. And behind the organ, and they made a big point in the materials about this, there was a step ladder that went from the gallery up to the bell tower. And there was to be a trap door behind the organ. So all of that was upstairs, and I imagine the choir was in the balcony as well with the organ. Okay. Now we're going on to page 22. It looks the same, I imagine. Y'all tell. And they're talking about the pews. Now in this, there should be a little sketch.
Oh, I see it.
See
I
the
do.
little
See it
little
uh-huh.
tiny drawing? It's kind of hard to be in the.
Might be in the shadows, but there's a little drawing of the pews there. And I learned something today. The young ones in this room, y'all have something to remember. Because Ed Neal told me something today about those pews. And we gotta remember this and write it down. We know in the records that they were made out of mahogany and pine. Well, sometime, and this is what Ed said, while Dr. Hand was here, they said, this is pine. We want to replace it with mahogany. So I'm guessing the 1960s, most of the time Dr. Hand was there, they did the pews covered them in mahogany where that had been pine. The old pews were used in the basement, which, was downstairs. Oh, and this is something we'll have throughout. What happened to the 1841 sanctuary?
Like the first factory.
That was the first, I'm talking about this 1841 was the second one. You're right about the first one, Paula. It did. And it was put right down here and enlarged down here on the southwest corner of the lot. And yes, that was correct. But the 1841, we didn't know what happened to it. Well, they used it to build this church. A lot of the materials, anything that was good, was used in this building. in 1859. And it mentions it more than once. Each roving room, okay, choir members, each roving room had a fireplace. It had a light. It's either one or two lights, I forget. The furnaces were coal burning. And great care was to be taken that smoke and hot air pipes do not come into contact with woodwork. So aren't we glad that they took care of that? The registers must be of a star pattern. This is how detailed this information is. Even the shape of the air registers, the design, had to be whatever the star pattern was, which must have been a nice pattern at the time. Okay, gas lines for gas lights. Did I see something about lights in the questionnaire or question? We had gas. Did you know there were gas lines out here in the 1850s? The city had gas. Not only that, but the 1841 church had gas. And I talked to John Lupo a little bit about this, and he said, oh yes, there were gas works way, way back. So all of that I was shocked. I thought maybe 1870, 1880, something like that, but there were gas. Now that was just for lights, gas lights. But they had that coming there. The line was to be tapped in on wherever from the city on into the church. And it made reference to the fact that the 1841 church also had gas. Okay, and they were to use the pipes and good materials out of that church. See, that's how we know that. Okay, now we're going to something that makes us Baptist. What makes us Baptist? Baptistry. We're going to learn about our baptistry.
And y'all, again, I just wonder what y'all's,
Okay, it was to be made out of tin or zinc, and it was to be watertight. It was to be under the pulpit. Iron pipes, force pump, and waste pipe. All of these things were in the plans. There would be steps descending into the cistern, the baptistry cistern. Rack and pinion wheels and crank were down in the basement, in the rear of the basement, near the fireplaces maybe. There's rack and pinion wheels to crank it. There was to be a well in the rear of the basement with a force pump. And there was already a pump in use in the 1841 structure, which was to be reused. Again, this reusing, we're finding out what we already had. Was that interesting about so they would roll it out, roll that rack and pinion, then fill up the cistern. They would have the water coming in, use drainage. It said it went out into the ground. See, back then they didn't have to worry about where it drained. It just drained out on the ground. Okay. Questions about, I'm just gonna stop for a second. Does anyone have questions on the baptistry real quick? Okay. Okay, weather vane. We're going to the next page. We had a weather vane on top of our church, and it was specific. It didn't say what shape it was gonna be. Okay, seats to be cushioned, our pew seats. They were made of cotton osnaburg. Now that was kind of like muslin. It was kind of a coarse muslin. And crimson damask, crimson fabric, kind of heavy, good weight upholstery fabric. Okay, it was stuffed. It was stuffed with your best 3-inch thick moss. The best moss, 3 inches thick. So that's what they were sitting on. What are we sitting on? We don't know. I don't think it's moss. There were 2 library rooms, little side rooms with glass shelves and doors to be built. So those were designed to be libraries from way back. Okay, here's the information about the bell. The bell was to be used from the old church. So that bell sitting out there predates the sanctuary. Okay, that's something I didn't know until the other day when I was reading through this again. We talked about the lumber. It was going to come from a certain location from William Brooks. Okay, I'm just going to open it. Did I answer all your questions on that sheet, or did we skip any? Thank you. See, I did miss that. We had a number somebody mentioned that the other day, where's Myron? I said, Myron, well, that might have been what everything cost, but the church itself cost a little over $13,000. 13,000, we think 220, 13,000 something and $20. We couldn't quite read that digit, but it looks like $2,220 dollars. Other questions of any kind? Now this information will go to the church vault, I assume. I want it to be used. The presentation that I read a while ago will be included with this. Yes, sir.
Did it have any mention of the angels thing?
Let me tell you what I did. There were separate plans referenced in these plans that said that the decorations, they had a separate list of decorations and plans separate from that, but they're not with these. So we don't know about that. But we do know that there were separate decoration plans.
Mayor had a formal
Mention
right
them.
up in her speech.
Right.
And when they fell through the ceiling of that,
They located some of that. My goodness. We need to see. There was something towards the end of the plan, they rewrote it. They were gonna have 6 panels in the ceiling, like just panels of, I don't know, wood or plaster or whatever. And it was changed at the end of the contract to 2. And they weren't gonna be necessarily the same size. So again, all of this is subject to study, and I mean, you can read about every kind of nut and bolt and brick they put in this, and we could be here till tomorrow, but I honestly didn't absorb all that myself. And I knew y'all wouldn't either. I mean, I don't think we needed that, but anyway, any questions at all? Okay, but thank you so much, I appreciate your time. And it's up here, the document's up here. We can get, if y'all actually wanna read it, we've got some clearer images we can send you that would be easier to read from your laptop or something like that, if you would like that. Thank you so much.